Welcome to the Millennial and a Boomer Walk into a Coffee Bar podcast.
The very best podcast to get your life advice in the form of a grande caramel macchiato in a venti cup, 1/3 whole milk, 1/3 almond milk, 1/3 soy milk, double the amount of vanilla syrup, caramel wall in the cup, no caramel drizzle on top, upside down, of course, tall ice cup, whipped cream, rounded lid, one shot extra espresso, decaf, cinnamon sprinkled on the top, and for the name, that's David, spelled D-A-F-Y-D-D, please.
Or to get your business, finance, and life support, black coffee advice, I'm Dan, I'm a Boomer.
And I'm Chase, the Millennial. Thanks for joining us today.
Boy, this has been a long time in coming, actually. I'm excited as we start this podcast and kind of kick this off.
Well, we've been talking about it literally for probably two years now. We've been kicking it around. We've got a whole bunch of different things happening. So first, we're writing a book about the same topic, maybe a little bit more in depth, a couple more examples, definitely the jokes. But the podcast is really more of a newer thing that we're adding on to this idea.
See, I'm a paper and pencil kind of guy, Boomer, right? And when Chase had proposed that we do this and do a podcast, I'm like, what's a podcast? And, so I'm expanding and spreading my wings to get into bigger and better electronic adventures. But I'll tell you, how this all started is I was working my Boomer job, driving and flying on a Boomer destined trip with my business, and I got a piece of paper in the back of an envelope, literally the back of an envelope, and I started writing down topics that millennials and boomers have completely different viewpoints on. And I thought, wouldn't this be fun to write a book with my son Chase, the Boomer, Dad, Chase, the millennial. Boomers are confused, so you got to leave a little bit of compassion on us. But I wanted to write a book, and so I wrote down all these topics, and it sat in my briefcase for years and years. And then finally, the reality of it's here, and we're going to try to put this together, and not only the book, but this podcast.
Yeah, we've talked about why this is so important, and it's important because so many times you hear the millennials complaining about the boomers.
Exactly.
And then you hear the boomers complaining about the millennials. And both have a vantage point looking at the same item, but completely different viewpoints from that,
Yeah, and one of the interesting things when I was first putting this through my brain, I thought, it's out with the old boomers and in with the new, the millennials. And of course, boomers, and you boomers out there will appreciate this, we're right. We've got experience. Millennials, they're wrong. But that's not the case. That's not the case at all. They're different. And what we need to do is come to a middle ground where I know you like to make fun of boomers, and I know we like to shake our head against millennials, but this is going to be a good level evening point where we can talk about it. And hopefully we can help people out there.
Well, honestly, that reminds me of one of my favorite boomer jokes. Why did the boomer have a no coins policy in his store?
Don't have any idea on that one.
He couldn't tolerate change.
There's a lot of things that we change. We change our mind, we change our shorts, we change a lot of things along the way. But one of the things that I think boomers are slow in changing is to adopt the new mentality of a lot of the generational challenges that we've had. And if you think of it, we had the same thing when we were growing up. The post-war folks, there were a lot of changes that we went through, say, in a lot of the topics that we're going to discuss and a lot of the things that we're going to bring to highlight accordingly. So I'm actually really excited about this. And maybe we could talk about a few of the examples or some of the chapters of the book or topics for what we want to have on this podcast.
Yeah. This being our first podcast, we're really not going to deep dive into any of these topics, but instead we're going to give you an overview, why we decided to do it, which we've just done, and then a handful of the chapters from the book, and those will translate into podcast topics. And maybe we just jump in on a couple and give a little off-the-cuff advice and thoughts as we go through them.
everything has a acronym that starts this, and I was sitting here thinking just now, BAM. We're the BAM duo, the BAM whatever. I don't even know if that works, but that's kind of the direction that we're going to go. But when I first started writing down some of the topics, it was more along the business sense, more along the career. But then as my list started to grow, I thought, boy, there's things in everyday living, advice that I think you could give to boomers, and advice that I can certainly give to the millennials. But it branched out. But I think where we started this was in our business life. And I had several millennials working for me. And one of the things that they would come up to me literally and say after, 6 months on the job was, hey, when am I going to get a vice president title? Or when am I going to be CEO? And I'm like, son, it took me almost 40 years to get to the point where I could say that I've arrived. You're not going to be able to do it in 6 months. So there's got to be a calibration period on control your own career, but keep your progression reasonable and understandable, but control your own career.
Wait a minute. That's not how it works. We just wake up in our dorm room one day, design some app or software, and make millions as a new CEO. Isn't that how this works?
I'm afraid not, son. You got a lot of learning, and it takes a lot of hard work, and there are some of those that happens to, but those are not the norm. And I think if you take control of your career and have a plan and have a purpose, that's one of the great topics that we can talk about is the career moves associated with millennials. And by the way, millennials have to understand that most likely in early times of their career, they're going to probably be working for a boomer that just doesn't get some of the things that those millennials come up with, right?
Well, the good news is when we're young and we're the new guy on the block and have to get the coffee, your coffee is really easy to order. I'll have a black coffee, please. No room for cream.
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. But, in order to even get your career kick-started, you've got to take on some responsibility. And one of the basic things of responsibility is how to run a meeting. That's another topic that we'd like to go into, because there's actually a way to run a successful meeting and to have an expected outcome and help to drive that with contributions from boomers, Generation X, millennials, and all across the board. So that's one of the other topics, a simple thing about how to successfully run a business meeting.
Yeah, I agree. Looking at how to run a meeting, that's not something that you're taught in school.
Yeah,
That's not something that you're taught in your entry-level job. In fact, you sit in your entry-level job in some of these meetings, the handful that you actually get invited to, and you think, that could have been an email. So, running a meeting is important, not because it's a meeting, but because there's got to be an outcome associated with it.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to get into that one. I learned that one the hard way by running really terrible meetings when I first became a manager. And I've got some great stories that I'm going to tell.
Well, actually, let me tell you, I know a lot of boomers that run terrible meetings. They're not productive. In fact, a lot of times they're counterproductive. But Chase, you mentioned something else that I wanted to touch on is email, right? You had made a comment, I could have put that in an email. There's even things and topics that we want to discuss about an email. For example, you don't put to John, Pete, Sally, Sue, Bill, and everybody else. You need to assign that to someone. It's okay to carbon copy, but if you want a response, you're not going to get it by assigning it to 10 people. So assign it to one. So these are the kind of topics that actually have some common sense to it, I hope, from both the boomer and millennial standpoint, but they're just good business sense.
Absolutely. They're things that transcend the age and the mentality.
Exactly.
And they really will convert to better responses, actual responses to emails. People actually showing up to your meetings versus just blowing it off because it's one more email or calendar invite. So, it's going to be great.
Communications, right? It's just an effective way to communicate. And by the way, just so you know, as part of communications, I'm a pick up the phone and call kind of guy. And I hear, oh, just text me. I don't want to text you. I want to talk to you. No, just text me. I don't want to talk to you. And there's a big difference there between millennials and boomers. And I know a bunch of my boomer friends that can text, but slowly, but they can still text. So we're catching up to the activities associated with the new electronic communication.
Which is very funny because as a millennial, as soon as I see my phone ring, my eyes automatically roll. Oh, I gotta talk to this guy again. He could have put that in a text message. We could be done by now.
Yeah.
Even
Well,
even better, where's Slack? Let's get this into Slack so we have a record of it later.
I don't even know what Slack is, but I think you can say that when your mama calls you. But when your daddy calls you, I want your eyes to light up and say, here we go. It's going to be a great conversation with my father. So,
Yeah, well, not only some of those things that we've talked about already around the business side, but as we kind of wrap up our first podcast, we're gonna dig into some of the personal life, because the personal aspects and making sure that your personal life is aligned will bleed over into your business life
right.
in a very real way. And I think of the biggest probably area that has an immediate bleed over: social media.
Yeah.
And millennials love social media. We've already moved on from Facebook, which I know all the boomers are still there. But if you want to find us, we're on TikTok and Instagram and other places. But even I as a millennial, the first place that I go now when I'm hiring someone is I look their name up and I look it up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and I see what they're posting. And I have not hired people because of what I found on their social media. Because if their life is crazy like that on social and they're willing to put that out for everyone, it's only a matter of time before that mess makes its way into the office.
So that's interesting you say that. Let me tell you what I do when I hire somebody is I actually go find a millennial and beg them to go look up on people's social media and tell me what their character is, what they're posting, what they're vacationing like. Now, I tell you, boomers love food pics. They love, love, love. So get used to it, millennials, get used to it. But I do want to see where we vacation, what they do in their part-times, how they can contribute to teamwork and things like that. So social media is a big, big, big part of the business world and of your private lives. I get it. We're not going to get away from social media. I finally get it's taken me years and years and years, but now I understand the importance of it. If you want to advertise, if you want to do a podcast or start a podcast, you've got to embrace social media and the electronic new world.
The new world.
New world.
It's 2023. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, well, beyond just social media, looking at, the purpose. You've already mentioned it at the top of the show, but having a purpose in your personal life, again, drives directly into your business life. Give us the snippet of what that looks like.
I've had this career plan in my career that, every 5 years I want to change jobs and take on additional responsibility and progress in my corporate climb, right? And the first year, say, you actually have a plan and you take on the job and your eyes are starry and you don't quite get it, right? And then the second year, you start to get comfortable with it. And then the third year, you say, wow, I've got this somewhat mastered. And then the fourth year, you actually look for someone to take your position. So in the fifth year, you can find that new job, backfill your old job, and have a plan and stick with it. And I've actually been fortunate to actually follow that plan every 5 years. It's been kind of like a good path. But it was a plan, right? So you should have a plan, and it can be not only in your career, but in your personal life, in a lot of the aspects that we're going to touch on.
Yeah, and as we kind of wrap up, we're going to be talking about things like relationships, having a balanced life, finance, both personally and from a business perspective, how politics and markets implicate your personal life and your business, looking at how that impacts the company that you work for, and being able to kind of read the tea leaves, as they say, to know because of this, then this is what's going to happen for me personally.
And What I really want to do is I want to learn from you. I want to be able to understand what you guys have to deliver, and I want to be open for that. And I hope our listeners will take from that the contributions of both of the generations that we're going to have. And by the way, we're going to probably have some guest speakers from Generation X and Generation
Generation
Z.
X, who are they?
But that's what it's just to come to an understanding and agree on contributions to this life that we all can kind of seize and move forward on. So Chase, I'm excited. I look forward to many times sitting across from you and having these conversations and giggling a lot, right? There's a lot to be said for happy discussions.
It'll probably be a really manly giggle, but
Yeah. And
yeah. Well, thanks so much for listening. What we're really excited for is for you to join us. Our next episode, podcast number 2, we are going to talk about, and this is news to you, I haven't even heard this yet.
oh,
Podcast
good.
number 2, we're going to talk about what to do as a new manager. I've got a great story of becoming a first-time manager and understanding a couple of key pieces on how to get your employees, A, to buy into you,
Yeah.
B, to buy into the vision and mission of what you're trying to accomplish, and then C, actually getting from A to B with those employees in tow.
Chase, have a great afternoon. I'm looking forward to this whole podcast.
We'll see y'all.